Hey, what's up, guys? So we get a lot of clients that come to us and they've got great ideas, right? I think we all know that there's always great ideas out there. Really, the critical thing is how to take that idea and actually execute on it, how to turn that idea into a real business strategy. And that's a fundamental part of how we work with clients and how we support them. And so we just finished, a 2-day strategy session with a client, really diving into this, this aspect of, hey, I got a great idea. How do I capitalize on it? How do I turn that into a tactical business and brand strategy and really bring it to life? So figured I would take a second, do a short video on just a high level overview of how we approach that, how we attack that. I'm sure you got tons of great ideas. And so maybe these tips will help you really just kind of make that transition from, light bulb moment, like I think this could be something cool, to actually how do we kind of push forward and create a real business and brand strategy around it. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a whiteboarding session here. We'll see how this ultimately works out. So hopefully that's coming through. So at a high level, it's key to understand really four, chunks of work or four high level phases to just, make this idea come alive. So the first thing is really up here. We'll call it just step one is branding. You'll have to, excuse my chicken scratch here, branding, and we'll call it branding / positioning, right? How do we kind of uniquely brand you, position you, uniquely brand your idea, position your idea, whatever it is in the market. We all know that there's so much noise out there, that if you don't do some of this deep work on the front end, which again, as we unpack this, there's tons of details, which we're not going to get into all this today, obviously, but if you don't put this work in on the front end, you're setting yourself up for really a much harder road downstream, right? So kind of step one is kind of how do we brand you, position you. Step two over here, and these necessarily don't always come in this sequential order, but these are just chunks of work, right? Activities you need to be thinking about to take this idea and ultimately develop it and make it come alive. So step two over here, we'll call it marketing. All right, so how do we ultimately, once we know your positioning in the market, what all are we doing to drive awareness of that, drive interest in that, drive traffic, right, to ultimately whatever you're trying to sell. Then we come over here, we have selling. All right, so how do we sell? So there's different types of things you may be selling. So there's lots of different tactics and techniques underneath the hood of this, but you obviously have to understand how to convert, how to sell. And then obviously as things get traction, we're talking about scaling. All right, as this idea takes flight, what are we doing to scale up people, scale up systems, scale up processes, really turn this into an even bigger business, around fulfilling and doing all the things you need to do. So at a high level, those are the three or the four kind of big buckets of work, right, that you need to be thinking about to take kind of this idea, right? So we say, hey, I've got this light bulb moment. It's supposed to be a light bulb. How do we kind of develop that? So this is really cool, right? It's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, right? I need to figure out how to position. I need to figure out how to market, sell, and then ultimately that leads as I get traction. That's going to let me kind of like scale up. But what I wanted to do is actually kind of dive a little bit deeper, because what's really cool is that those four kind of sections of work, right? That's how our curriculum at Brand Builders Group is structured. That's ultimately, the work we do day in, day out to support our clients. But, there's a more tactical way you have to look at this. There's a lot of details inside each of those phases. And at the end of the day, you have to look at what's the most efficient path, what's the most efficient kind of journey through a strategic subset of those four phases of activity to accomplish your goal, whatever that goal may be, whatever we're trying to launch, bring to market, whatever, right? So I want to take a little bit deeper dive into the tactics here. So if we say that this is, let's call this the journey. All right, this is the journey we're going on. We are over here, we've got an idea, trying to get over here where we've ultimately launched it. selling it, getting good traction, starting to scale it, et cetera, right? So there's all these checkpoints along the way. And the first thing we have to do, like I said before, is really lock into your, we'll call it your DNA. How do we uniquely position your brand, your product in the market? And when this is really the first step, right? If you remember that kind of circular process, this is step one in that branding slash positioning phase. And some of the key things you need to be thinking about doing here are really getting crystal clear on what's the monetization strategy. How are we going to make money with this thing? Because you may love doing it, you may be really good at doing it, but if you're not making any money, it's going to be hard to sustain it, right? And so how are we going to make money with this thing? What's the monetization strategy? The other thing we're going to say is CTA. Who's your core target audience, right? Who are we serving? Who are we selling to? Let's get crystal clear on, the different segments of the market. Let's get crystal clear on the demographic and psychographic characteristics of your ideal client, the ideal buyer for what you're thinking we want to bring to market. The other key thing we would talk about is ultimately the problem that you're solving in the market. I think, especially with a lot of this, a lot of new technology, a lot of the blockchain stuff, like there's a lot of hype, where it's like, this is cool, this is a trend, this stuff is hot right now, it's getting pumped. But it's like, if we really look underneath the hood, it's like, what problem is it solving, right? Like, we're all for new ideas, new innovations, new tech, new solutions, right? But if they're not truly solving an underlying problem for, hopefully a decent amount of people, it's going to be hard for this to really be sustainable long term, right? So let's get crystal clear on, the problem we're solving for our ideal client. And there's tons of deep work there. And again, we're not going to get all into that today, but there's a tremendous amount of power that comes from being crystal clear on, like, this is what we're about. This is what I'm about. This is the problem I am solving for this set of users out here. And that's what we're committed to doing each and every day with our product or service or whatever, right? And then the last thing is, ultimately, we would call it in our brand builders lingo, your brand positioning statement. But think of this as your high level messaging. You want to be thinking about, now that we know kind of how we're positioned in the market uniquely, how are we communicating with our ideal client in a way that grabs their attention, paints the picture about what we're promising to do and deliver for them, gets them excited about it, and ultimately they start leaning into what we're trying to sell them, right? So these are some fundamental first steps, we'll call it, up here, to kind of just lock in your unique, right? We call it your brand DNA, the unique positioning of you/your new offering in the market. So the next thing you have to kind of figure out is, we'll call it content. All right. We call this specifically captivating content, but anytime you are bringing something to market, if it's a product where it's just like, hey, it is what it is, like, I'm just trying to sell this thing that's on the shelf, it may not be as critical to do this. But if you're in the services industry, often even if you have some type of software product, whatever it is, people are buying into a methodology. They're buying into a process that you've uniquely designed and developed for how you solve this problem in the market. And that process and that methodology needs to be backed by real results. Like, you are an expert in this. You have engineered or come up with a methodology for how to help people that are struggling with kind of this problem over here get to a better place, overcome that, and get to a better place through this product or service offering. So if you haven't thought through that, right, that's not good, first and foremost, right? So at the end of the day, if somebody's like, well, what do you do? And you're like, well, hey, this is who I serve. This is what I do for them. And they're like, that's cool. How do you do it? You need to have a well thought out answer for, say, like, well, actually, yeah, there's kind of 4 phases to how we do this work, or there's 3 key steps that we take people through. Let me tell you about each one. And then you can unpack each one deeper if somebody is super intrigued and interested, right? So this type of information supports your pitches. It also supports information that would go on your website. It also supports content marketing strategy. It supports how you structure information in your learning management system. Again, it's it's all based on what we're launching, what we're selling. But what's critical, right? When we kind of look underneath the hood of your content, right? How you are logically structuring, how you deliver on your promise or how you actually do what you do. We would call this pillars, right? Or your structure, right? How do you break down your methodology into logical subsets or logical steps, right? If you can't logically organize how you do what you do so that you can understand it and deliver it, it's going to be hard for your consumers to wrap their head around what you're trying to teach them and follow a process that you're trying to take them through to get to a better place, right? So we need to logically structure kind of all this stuff, and there's tons of work here. And then the other thing would be, we'll call it content marketing, right? So once you figure out kind of these high level pillars or structures for how you do what you do, it sets you up perfectly to say like, hey, how can we tease out and identify little micro topics? And again, we aren't going to get into all the details today, but how do we kind of identify these micro topics within each of those steps of the process that your ideal client is interested in? And then those can inform these little micro content pieces you use for inspiration to put out organic content on social, on your blog, on your podcast, et cetera, right? To kind of tease this out, get initial market feedback, hopefully start piquing interest and moving people gradually kind of from not knowing about you or not knowing about this offering to like, this is interesting, this is valuable. But again, we're not selling yet, right? We're just kind of nurturing, getting early stage market feedback, et cetera. So tons of details here, but what's really cool is once you get your content, we'll call it kind of this step two, once we get your kind of content and methodology logically organized, this is going to lay the groundwork for how we package this, right? You could be writing a new book, so this would be packaged in a book. You could be creating a new talk. This could be packaged in a keynote. You could be creating a new membership program or coaching program or consulting curriculum, right? That would be packaged in a learning management system, et cetera. Like it doesn't really matter, but you have to be super clear about how you're doing what you're doing, right? That's the bottom line here. And if you don't have that, you don't have a really solid foundation to build this product or service offering on top of. So the third thing, right, we'll call it number three, is presentation, right? So I'm going to make this one brief, but the bottom line is once you kind of get your positioning tight and we've kind of got your methodology built out, we got to figure out how to go out and pique interest and kind of drive awareness in the market. So really getting in front of your ideal client wherever they're gathering, ideally through strategic partnerships with other people, other platforms that have already gathered a bunch of your ideal client. So the question is, what are you going to say? Like when you get that great opportunity on somebody's podcast as a guest, right? When you get that opportunity to do a webinar to your ideal client or a presentation, like whatever it is, right? What are you going to say? How are we going to really deliver tons of value, pique their interest, and ultimately pull them back to where we're trying to take them to sell them what we're trying to sell? But you got to figure out your pitch. You got to figure out your presentation. And that's a key thing that's just going to support the sales process, support the marketing process, everything. So that's step three. And the way we look at that is really just saying, hey, we got a crystal clear picture of the full way you do what you do. What's a really awesome subset of that we can pull out and package in a killer presentation to go out and empower you to go deliver that, to again, deliver tons of value, but start kind of driving traffic back to where we're trying to send them to. So what's cool is this is all part of that, branding and, positioning phase that I kind of outlined at the beginning. So these are kind of some of those sub elements. What's really cool now is we're basically going to say, hey, we were pretty clear on all this. We got to start getting after it. We got to start doing some outbound things to move the needle quickly, start selling this stuff. So we would start saying, hey, we're going to we're going to start doing a lot of key things to do outbound sales, right? Maybe work in your network, tons of details there, but this is going to be the fastest way to move the needle, is to start saying, hey, I've got my positioning tight, I got my pitch tight, got my methodology tight. Now I need to take matters into my own hands and not rely on kind of, some of this inbound marketing stuff that's great and it's key to scale, but it's going to take a lot longer to get traction and start driving traffic. So what do we do immediately to start kind of doing outbound activities to go sell, peak interest, drive traffic, convert new buyers, right? So this would be, we'll call this selling. Is kind of this was a small subset of that broader 4-phase process. And then we get into some things around marketing. So we'll call it 5. So marketing, right? Lots of details here. But ultimately we're saying, hey, we feel good about our positioning. We're doing some outbound things to get quick wins, take matters into our own hands. But I now also need to be thinking about how we scale this up, right? I can't be at every networking event. I'm not in connection in groups with everybody that may help me get in front of my ideal clients. So how do I scale this up? How do I reach a broader audience? And that's where we start looking at your broader digital strategy to scale this up. But a lot of people think that, hey, I got to have my presence on social platforms. I got to have this great website. I got to be doing all this blogging and content marketing and got to have funnels, right? I got to be doing all this marketing stuff, which you do, but you need to understand that, more often than not, that stuff takes time, right? It's, it's key to scale, but it's also going to be slow to see results in most cases, unless you've already built a really established platform and audience that you can activate really quickly, okay? Which is not usually the case for most people that are early, kind of starting up, spinning up something new. So, but bottom line, when we look at this journey to get you where you want to get to, you got to think about this marketing stuff. And so marketing is where we're going to be looking at, your offer structure, say OS there, as we start looking at, hey, I'm going to be driving traffic to something, potentially trying to sell it online or peak interest to get people to schedule a call to sell them offline, right? We want to get really clever about the structure of the offer, because that's going to be placed on ultimately your sales page, right? How do we create really killer sales pages for this offer, whatever it is? Now, how do we think about funnels, right? How are we capturing, nurturing, converting new leads in as much of an automated fashion as possible? And then ultimately, how do we package all this in like a really awesome website, your sales page, your funnels, your blog? How do we build out kind of this full digital presence through a website for the brand, for the offering, etc. And then, then we kind of start thinking about how do we start driving more traffic to those web properties, to those digital assets, using more inbound tactics. So there's going to be various strategies for free traffic, social media, email marketing, etc., paid traffic, which is going to be obviously all the different ways to drive paid traffic. And then last but not least, which is the traffic we all love the most, is the get paid traffic. So whether you are somebody bought your book and you have calls to action in it, whether you're getting paid to speak and you have the ability to have a call to action at the end, whatever it may be, that's another kind of form of traffic we want to be taking advantage of if and when possible. So, all of this ultimately leads to hopefully traction, right? And then down here, we get into more of these scaling solutions, which we're not going to get into that today. But if you don't kind of really understand how to take something, gosh, this is a bad light bulb, that light bulb moment you have out here, and really think about how to back into a tactical strategy. How do we take that idea and really develop it into a great business strategy that you can take to potentially even investors if you're trying to get financial support or just continue to push down this path yourself. It's hard, right? I think we all know that ideas are a dime a dozen at the end of the day. If you don't have some way to really take that idea market validate it and run it through a process to make it come alive, it's it's not going to be good at the end of the day. There's going to be a lot of great ideas that don't materialize, don't develop, and don't ultimately serve clients and help them kind of break free from these problems at the end of the day. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it. Hopefully that was helpful to just see that you're able to make some sense out of kind of the messy whiteboarding session there. But anyway, we all got tons of great ideas. Hopefully this is helpful to kind of think about how to break down a process to really develop that idea into kind of a proof of concept that you can then kind of start taking to market, get some early market feedback, and then based on that, iterate, pivot if you need to, but really just keep building it out into something that hopefully gets more and more traction, takes flight, and then it starts getting really exciting. So anyway, guys, have a great one. Hope this was helpful.